So, Carl, now, your book is a little bit different because you're utterly specific
joyless as well.
Yeah, it's joyous. You're utterly specific about where your book is set. And it's so detailed. It's fantastic. I love that. It opens at a hospital with a surgeon called Elizabeth Taylor. It's an ongoing joke through the book. Looking at a young patient who's become infected from an IUCD, which I did not know they were called that, but that's good. And we know which hospital it is by page 3, when the young registrar mentions that the young woman has seen a GP in Adelaide Road. Bang, we're right there. It's just great. And then Liz Taylor walked. Liz, is it all right to call her Liz? She really, yeah, she's Liz.
Loco Liz, as they call it.
What's that?
They call her Loco Liz.
Loco Liz. Yeah. She walks home, doesn't she? It is walking home, past the countdown. So goes to countdown, gets herself half a rotisserie chicken and a stale baguette. I love the detail. And I think a potato salad, yeah. And anyway, we know her home as well, an old character cottage that she's done up obsessively by herself, and so on. So, yeah, I read your book when it first came out, and I reread it. I've been rereading it, haven't quite finished it, and just really, I have to say, loving rereading it. And I'm not a rereader normally, but I feel like I'm getting a whole other layers out of it. So thank you. It is a terrific read. What does the exact location bring to your story?
Well, I've been listening to this conversation with great interest, because it's stuff that every writer goes through when you start to write. Events got to happen somewhere, don't they? But how do you do that? And I think I was trying to think about answering this, and I think maybe I've developed a thing that I do, and that started off with my first book, which was called The Lazy Boys, and it was about teenage boys being very bad deep in the deep south, and particularly at university. And part of that was about I didn't know or have books around me which dealt with stuff that I knew, like the street that I lived on, or the things that I did, and the proper nouns that weren't in the books that I read. I didn't see Timaru, and that might have been a blessing for a lot of people. But part of me wanted to see my, representation matters, doesn't it? And we were taught at university, the debate about, good is just good, and representation of your experience or whatever doesn't necessarily have an innate value, but it does, doesn't it? When you see your experience or your town or whatever, you get a feeling. And I think what's kind of relevant to what we're sort of talking about earlier is about appropriation of a place. I tend to think if it's good and if it works and if it's true and right, then you don't really have those appropriation arguments. Maybe I don't know if that's it's nothing to do with Newtown, is it? Sorry.
No, it's valid. So, I mean, obviously, where were you when you wrote it?
This book?
Yeah.
I was in Melrose. I was here. So this is actually the first book I've written. It's always been about remembering a place that I've been in and trying to recall it. And this book, I was like, I have 2 days a week, school hours to write this in. It better be somewhere close to home so I can do the research,
That's a good reason to pick a place now. That's really interesting, isn't it? Because, yes, often writers do that, remembering from a distance thing. It seems easier to do it from a distance. So it's right there in your face and you write about it. I think it gives it that real urgency in the book, actually. You are right there, walking the streets or driving the streets with this Loco Liz and everything that sort of befalls her. There's a real sense of alarm throughout the book, not helped by the fact that there's a sort of parallel story to do with the Challenger shuttle disaster and how that occurred. So alarm is from the word go. And I just wondered, just today when I came in earlier to sort of get the vibe of the place before we had this discussion, is there a sense of alarm in Newtown? The fact that you've got the hospital right there, or hospitals here, and often you're hearing alarms. Is it me? I just wonder if, others here might feel it or not, but do you think, is it a part of living here or being
It's a really
here?
interesting thought. Yeah, quite possibly. And I think what others have been talking about as well is a little bit like parts of London, is that you have extreme poverty and need sitting alongside wealth or privilege or access to stuff. And that's quite kind of really powerfully represented for me in the private hospitals, 2 of which we have, and the public hospital, which presents its own barriers to a lot of people. And you have fairly wealthy people going in to work in these hospitals, passing through, going to nice bars and having nice lives, and other people in other professions, obviously, as well. And then you have, I think it's a Thomas Harris term, the plight, all around you, constantly. You have people suffering, shut out of, the bourgeois systems permanently. And then, you have sirens going off constantly.
And you got, with Elizabeth Taylor, of course, she's well off. She's got that beautiful home she's done up. She goes home to that, but she's coming through an area with a whole lot of people with various backgrounds, isn't she? You don't spell that out, but it's kind of inherent, I guess, again, because you're being so specific so we can visualise the very places she's going through without you even having to say a lot about the community. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's sort of there by implication. Yeah, it might be what you're sort of saying there. And I think I sort of had multiple concerns because I just realised that Rachel's brother is a senior cardiologist in Middlemore Hospital. And I've been working with him for about the last 3 years. So
no way.
I had a quintessential New Zealand moment just there.
There, listen. There's an alarm right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Siren.
Yeah, it's telling me, Carl, shut up. Yeah. So I guess the sense for me is that if I get the detail wrong, there's going to be someone who's going to tell me about it, and they're going to be really close to me in my life, and they're going to make me feel very bad indeed.
So, I guess that's one other thing about having all the detail you have about Newtown Hospital, the whole area around here really too, because she drives up through Island Bay, Houghton Bay and all the rest. I guess establishing that detail helps the reader, doesn't it, with all this medical detail you give us. It's so thorough, and you're really asking a lot of the reader, aren't you, that we've got to embrace it. We've got to understand how she does quite complex surgery, I think. And I think my first read, I kind of leapt over that.
Yeah, fair enough.
But do you think that? Did you almost think that deliberately? There, guys. Honestly, I didn't ask them to come.
I barely even hear it now.
Yeah. You don't notice it. Yeah. So, but did you think that in the writing? That I guess it's maybe the way you write that's got this extreme detail that takes us into place, and then also the work required.
Yeah, that they might counterbalance each other, or. Yeah, I'm not sure, because I think it's just hardwired into me that I believe that places exist and that I have my own filter when I write about them, that I'll pick and choose stuff from them that other people know vastly different things to me, so that I already have my palette of a place, of colours and things I notice and see, and I put that through a character. But I really care about detail, and I care about getting things right, and that goes for like the operation. It's like respect to the work, but also, respect to the place as well.
And you have your knowledge of medical things from your work in the medical sphere. Is it, you've obviously worked closely with doctors.
Yeah, I do for my work, but I'm not in theatres. I'm not doing operations on people. I'm what's known as medical adjacent, as someone said. So I work in. It's essentially medical publishing, and medical publishing in like the UK is a multi-billion-dollar industry, or multi-billion pound. But in New Zealand, we sort of have one general medical journal, which is, great. But there's a medical paper published every 2 seconds in the world. So it's where knowledge comes from in medicine. So it's actually a very, very important and rigorous process with all its own problems. But through that work, I work with doctors all the time, and that has been an amazing learning experience, because they are very strange and interesting people.
Did you say strange and interesting?
Very strange and very interesting.
Are there any doctors here? Oh, kicking myself over. I think it's time for you to read a little bit, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
That would be good.
So for those of you who don't know the book, it's quite a simple premise, really. We have a female general consultant surgeon at Wellington Hospital who is part of a team when a terrible mistake happens in an operation, and a young woman dies, and Elizabeth's career starts collapsing around her as people start to attribute blame for this mistake. So shortly after she's been to Southern Cross Hospital over there, and the operation has been cancelled, and she's not really told why, she suddenly finds herself in working hours outside in Newtown with nothing to do, and nobody wants her. Out into the sun. She checked her phone. There was nothing, and it was 9:30, and she walked home through emptied Newtown, passing some of the frequent flyers who turn up at A&E, limping along Ridderford Street. The gout, the bone spurs, the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, the ankle broken for who knows how long, and the old brown skin under the caked-on socks sloughing off in her hands. The impaired, limping, addicted, reeking of meths and smoking the butt, BO and sickly goatish trans-3-methyl-2-hexanoic acid, the scent of schizophrenia. All of the plight and the damaged out after rush hour. Past Moonbar, 2 young mothers in big sunglasses with their children. The old wrecks outside the Newtown bakery and coffee shop. The man in camouflage who always wears his bandana and his reflective sunglasses even at night. The tall, pale man with the tattooed skull, who walks slowly, who likes camouflage too. After 9 a.m, all in Newtown unemployed, out in the sun with her, and the long day, and the looping silences ahead. She crossed to the shady side of the street by the McDonald's to take the alley up to Rintle, and on the traffic island she looked up at a sound. In a break in the traffic came a young girl, riding an old-fashioned bicycle with a basket, towing a boy on a skateboard behind her down the middle of the road. They were maybe 20-something. The girl serious and blonde and pretty, the boy behind her young and cute and hairy, and hanging onto some torn blanket tied around the seat pole. He was swerving to avoid the manhole covers. They were Lisa's age, really, the girl who had died. Nothing to hide and nothing to lose. And Elizabeth stopped dead on the traffic island and stood there like an idiot to watch them pass and leave her behind and cross the Constable Street intersection against the lights where they disappeared into the cars.
That's great. In my reread, I haven't got to that passage.
I was really
yet.
trying to put some drama into that, wasn't I?
Yeah, you were. You did well. I like your moon bar. I do have been there a few times. What a great read. So to explain to people who don't write fiction, you would have seen people like that, but not exactly like that probably, and you've kind of created kind of types, I guess. You've imagined...
Do you mean the locals?
Yeah. You know how that works. So, unless you do you like take your little notebook and just basically transfer people that you've seen into your book?
I think probably some people here would recognise those people, yeah. They're very specific.
Oh, right. Okay. So when I say that, so my approach would be to sort of muffle it a little bit, but you've literally just taken those people off the street and put them in your book.
Yeah, and I don't think I've appropriated them. I mean, they're people where I noticed them. But what was I going to say?
And how would you feel if they saw themselves there?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they would have an argument with me about it. I'm not sure. I mean, I've in the past I've had people say, you know, someone told me you raped my memories.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. That's quite harsh.
But he had completely misinterpreted the characters in the book, and he thought someone was him, which wasn't him. So,
that's what I
people's
have
minds are
found
strange.
happens. I find that people go, oh, yes, I know that person, but it's not that person. And usually people actually don't see themselves, to be honest.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Having said I muffle it, I do also, as I'm also a writer, so I, bring people in, I guess, but make them look a little bit different, I think.
It's a risky business.
It's a risky business, anyway. So you do recognise okay. Nice.
That's what I was going to say, is that I think young people and poor people and people who are shut out feel themselves invisible. And even when they are very visible, they still feel themselves invisible. Teenage boys are a particular example of this.
Yeah. So you think they wouldn't notice themselves in there because they don't expect anyone to notice them? Or?
I think when you're disempowered, then you feel that you're not present in the world to other people.
Fascinating. So the US edition of this novel, is the novel also set here in Newtown?
Yeah, they didn't change anything.
Wow, interesting. Because they have done that. I've seen that with New Zealand novels before, and I'm forgetting the name of it. But there was one that was very much set in Wellington. It'll come to me. And somebody gave me a copy of it, thinking it was it, but it wasn't it. It was an English, a UK version set in London. It was such a shock because I'd already read the New Zealand version. It'll come a little bit later, hopefully down the track. But
Bill Manhire tells that famous story about Janet Frame writing about a batch, a New Zealand batch, and the UK editors insisting on putting a T in the word every time it appeared.
Well, that's just completely ridiculous, isn't it? Terrible. Okay, thank you for that, Carl.